The Nebraska sun beat down on a lonely stretch of farmland, its heat pressing against the earth like a warning. Out here, miles from the nearest town, a decaying farmhouse stood guard over secrets no one was meant to uncover. Locals whispered about strange sounds at night, noises too human to belong to animals, too animal to belong to men. On this isolated farm, a father once tried to shield his family from something ancient and unstoppable. Now his sons live caged beside the livestock, locked away not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. For when darkness falls, the boys are no longer entirely human. What begins as a story of neglect unravels into something far more terrifying. A tale of bloodlines twisted by forces older than war, older than America itself. And one night, under the dying sun, those cages won't hold forever. So the question is, what do you do when the monsters are your own children? If you're gripped already, hit that like button. It tells us to keep bringing you these hidden stories. Make sure you subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in this chilling saga. And if you know someone who'd dare to watch this, share it. Just don't blame me if they can't sleep tonight. The Nebraska plains stretched endlessly under the blistering sun, a landscape where silence seemed heavier than words, and every abandoned barn or rusting tractor whispered stories men no longer dared to tell aloud. Miles away from paved roads, a weather-beaten farmhouse leaned against the wind, its paint peeled and its windows sealed tight with iron sheets. Men in town swore something lived inside, something never meant to walk free. They claimed the farm had once belonged to a proud veterinarian, a man respected for his steady hands and his calm voice with frightened animals. Yet now, his land was marked only by fear. The farmhouse stood like a sentinel, its roof sagging, its porch collapsing under years of neglect. Strangers who wandered too close often turned back after dusk, spooked by sounds not belonging to cattle, nor any creature recognizable to ordinary ears. Men in the diner whispered late at night about growls carried on the wind, footsteps heavier than hooves. Others spoke of low, rhythmic chanting as though someone counted down the hours until dark. Truckers passing by the dirt road sometimes spotted faint light flickering behind bolted shutters. They dismissed it as lanterns, but one swore he saw elongated shadows stretching unnaturally, bending in ways human bones should never allow. The locals had explanations, of course. Some said feral hogs had taken over the barn. Others claimed wild men lived there now, descendants of outlaws who chose seclusion. No one dared investigate deeply. Every story circled back to the missing veterinarian, Robert Crowley, a man who once healed livestock across 3 counties. He vanished abruptly, leaving his sons under the care of neighbors who never saw them again. Old men remembered Robert's calm stride through town, his hand on the reins of horses brought for treatment. But when his eyes turned bloodshot and his gait uneven, whispers began of something eating him from within. By the summer of 1981, livestock deaths rose sharply. Cattle were found torn open, their spines stretched unnaturally long. Robert claimed disease, yet no veterinarian school had trained him for bodies that twisted beyond biology. When he withdrew completely from town, locking his gates and stringing barbed wire chest high, neighbors knew something was wrong. But men raised on respect for privacy stayed away, muttering excuses to ease their fear. Those who approached reported traps everywhere, steel jaws hidden under hay, barbed hooks dangling from rafters. Robert no longer greeted visitors. His sons were glimpsed behind barred windows, their faces pale and eyes watchful. Hunters found evidence of something strange in the woods near the farm. Deer carcasses lay abandoned, stripped clean in ways no coyote could manage. Tracks left behind resembled barefoot men, but with far too many toes. By 1983, men stopped speaking Robert's name aloud. It was safer that way. Superstitions thrived in silence. The farmhouse became a landmark of dread, passed quickly when seen from the highway. Traveling salesmen sometimes asked about the farm. The locals only shrugged, lowering their eyes. To speak too long about the Crowley place was to invite nightmares, or worse, recognition from something listening unseen. Yet one memory clung stubbornly. Robert's youngest son, glimpsed by a delivery man through a crack in the barn, a boy no older than 5, clutching iron bars, teeth glinting too sharp in lantern light. The delivery man drove off, pale and trembling, never speaking publicly, but at the bar, whiskey loosened his tongue. He swore the child hissed at him, whispering hunger in a voice not meant for humans. Every tale returned to hunger. The Crowley boys were said to be ravenous, tearing through meat with animal ferocity. Yet no butcher remembered Margaret buying beef. Where their meals came from, no one asked. One winter, neighbors heard distant howls carried across the snow, not wolves, deeper, layered with voices like men echoing inside hollow metal. Dogs cowered that night, refusing to leave barns until morning broke. By spring, the farmhouse shutters were sealed tighter. No smoke rose from the chimney, yet laundry lines hung heavy with shirts and trousers. Proof enough the boys lived, even if unseen by daylight. Rumors grew darker. Hunters found claw marks etched into oak trees, too high for any natural predator. Men speculated the boys climbed them in the night, but others insisted something larger roamed the farm. One stormy evening, lightning illuminated the barn doors wide open. A traveler swore he saw cages stacked like kennels inside, each holding figures that thrashed and snarled as the thunder rolled. He never returned. The sheriff received anonymous tips more than once. Reports spoke of children crying, begging to be freed. But whenever deputies arrived, they found only silence, padlocked gates, and the suffocating stench of decay. No one pressed further. The county had too many problems, too few resources. Men told themselves the Crowleys chose solitude, and sometimes pretending not to see was easier than uncovering unbearable truth. Still, the story never died. Each year, more boys disappeared from nearby towns. Runaways, drifters, forgotten sons. And each time, whispers arose that perhaps they hadn't left at all, but been lured into the farm. A drifter once staggered into town, bloody and half-mad, claiming he'd been locked in the Crowley barn. He spoke of cages, chains, and a boy with eyes reflecting like mirrors in the dark. They dismissed him as insane, yet his arms bore wounds too precise for barbed wire, deep crescents, as if bitten by jaws lined with more teeth than a man should possess. He vanished before dawn. By the mid-'80s, men avoided the road entirely. The farmhouse stood abandoned in the collective mind, even as smoke sometimes curled from hidden chimneys and voices echoed faintly across the wheat fields at dusk. Farmers nearby noticed livestock gone missing. Cows vanished without a trace, as though lifted whole into the night. No predator left pastures so clean. Only the Crowley land bordered each theft. Suspicion festered, yet confronting the place was unthinkable. Fathers warned their sons never to wander near. Boys dared each other to touch the front gate, but none lingered past sunset, not after hearing the guttural growls. Inside the farmhouse, unseen by neighbors, Robert's rules had been etched into wooden boards. Every boy was locked into cages before sundown. No contact after dark, no exceptions. A life governed entirely by fear. The barn reeked of iron, straw, and something fouler. Behind the reinforced bars, the Crowley boys waited each night, their eyes glowing faintly when lanterns passed. Hunger whispered constantly from their lips. Robert's journals, hidden under floorboards, told of his own transformation, the teeth he grew, the nights he begged to be locked away. His sons, born of the same soil, inherited his curse. In those journals, he wrote of Camp Garrison, a military base that had unearthed something ancient in the earth. Spores invisible by day but alive at night. The farm sat within that poisoned ring. Robert vanished not from neglect, but necessity. His final words, scribbled in shaky ink, begged his sons to be caged for their sake and the world's. But sons cannot be caged forever. The farm remained, patient as the soil itself. Each sunset brought scratching claws and muffled cries from cages too small for growing boys, and each dawn revealed children smiling, as if nothing had happened. Outsiders never saw both sides of them. By day, they looked like any sons of Nebraska, reading, playing, speaking politely. By night, their bones betrayed them, stretching toward something monstrous. That duality haunted the farm, dividing truth from illusion. Were they victims of disease or harbingers of something older? Only one certainty endured: the cages would not last forever. And when the locks finally snapped, the Nebraska plains would tremble, for the isolated farm no longer hid boys. It hid the first glimpse of a future no man was ready to face. The barn groaned beneath the weight of age, its wooden beams darkened by decades of storms. Inside, however, the air felt unnaturally heavy, humming with restless energy that pulsed through the cages lined in rows. Iron bars gleamed dully in lantern light, each enclosure meticulously reinforced with chains and padlocks. Within them sat boys whose eyes carried something unearthly, something hungry, their voices hushed whispers echoing through straw-strewn floors. The eldest sat upright, shoulders squared, eyes hollow yet alert. His hands clutched a weathered book, though every so often his gaze wandered toward shadows curling like smoke in the rafters above. Two brothers sat together, knees touching, movements synchronized with uncanny precision. Their wooden toys clattered against bars as they shifted in perfect unison, speaking only when prompted, their voices blending into one eerie, unbroken tone. The youngest crouched in the farthest corner, his body half wrapped in a tattered blanket. Long fingers scraped grooves into concrete, and when he lifted his head, his teeth glinted too sharp under trembling light. Visitors stepping into this place struggled to reconcile what they saw. The cages weren't dirty. Each contained blankets, bowls, even books. Yet the undeniable reality remained. These were children, locked like livestock. The air carried an odor unlike any farm smell, sweet rot mingled with rust. It clung to the skin, settling into nostrils, leaving men who entered gagging, their breakfasts threatening rebellion inside twisted stomachs. Each cage bore multiple locks, not haphazard but deliberate, their keys strung around the caretaker's neck. He turned them nervously, glancing often at the horizon, counting silently as sunlight dwindled toward inevitable nightfall. He muttered rules under his breath. No touch after 6. No cage opened until sunrise. Feed raw meat before dark. If recognition fails at dawn, use the rifle hidden by the door. The eldest boy spoke quietly, his voice carrying more restraint than innocence. He asked who had come, why they stared, whether the outside world remembered the Crowley name at all anymore. His younger brothers answered in unison, repeating fragments of thought like a chant. We wait, we change, we hunger. Their words rattled through iron, chilling listeners who realized these weren't rehearsed lines. The youngest whispered differently. His voice cracked between syllables, layered like overlapping echoes. Hungry, he muttered, eyes reflecting lantern glow, drool sliding down his chin. He sniffed the air as if scenting human blood. Despite the cages, nothing about this resembled safety. The bars bent slightly where boys had thrown themselves against them, claw marks etched deep, proof that strength far exceeded human measure once night descended. At daylight, they seemed almost normal. Boys studying arithmetic, stacking blocks, whispering about chores. Yet every cage carried the memory of midnight screams, reminding anyone watching that this barn was a battlefield. The caretaker explained with weary calm that cages weren't punishment, but necessity. It's the only way, he repeated. The only way to keep them safe and to keep you alive. The explanation fell like ash. How could boys be safe locked behind iron? Yet the trembling in his voice carried truth. This wasn't cruelty. It was desperate love bound in steel. He recounted how the eldest had once torn through a flock of chickens before dawn, awakening drenched in blood without memory. Since then, rules hardened, locks multiplied, and dawn became the measure of survival. The twins' story carried equal dread. Left unattended one night, they attacked each other, waking with flesh torn from identical arms, both crying but unable to recall the hunger that drove their violence. The youngest's birth had been worst of all. Doctors blamed deformity, called it defect. But his mother had seen the truth, fingers too long, eyes glowing in darkness. He had never known a human night. The barn bore scars of countless battles, splintered beams from failed restraints, scorched marks from hurried fires, blood soaked into straw. It was a place of containment, yet also a shrine to desperation. Visitors struggled to breathe within its suffocating confines. Every rustle of straw, every rattle of chains suggested eruption was moments away. Fear seeped into their bones as surely as dust filled lungs. Outside, traps lay scattered, jaws of steel waiting for escapees. Barbed wires wound low enough to catch ankles. This land had been remade into a fortress not against intruders, but against its own sons. The caretaker spoke of his own infection, scars on his arms from nights he nearly lost control. He admitted his future would end in a cage, too, if he lasted long enough. When asked why not flee, he shook his head. The spores lived in the soil, water, and air. Leaving meant spreading it further. Containment wasn't choice, it was obligation etched into marrow. Every evening, his steps grew frantic. He weighed meat portions carefully, labeling bowls with each boy's name. He paused longest at the youngest's, piling organs heavier than any ration for his brothers. As dusk neared, the barn shifted. Boys grew restless, eyes darting toward fading light. Their voices deepened unnaturally, words fracturing into growls, breath quickening as if unseen instincts tightened around their bones. Locks clicked shut with ritualistic precision. The caretaker whispered apologies each time, as though chains betrayed his heart. Yet his trembling hands revealed the truth. He feared what would happen without them. The eldest called out as bars clanged closed. "Are you staying?" His question lingered with eerie weight, as if he already knew the answer, but longed for human presence against the inevitable dark. The twins chanted together, counting backward as shadows lengthened, their rhythm steady, synchronized. 10, 9, 8. Their voices blurred with inhuman resonance, echoing like two speakers playing a single distorted recording. The youngest began to laugh, though laughter wasn't the right word. It was higher, sharper, bending into screeches that scraped nerves raw, his small body twitching with anticipation, teeth gnashing against iron. And then, silence descended. The sun dipped lower, staining barn windows blood red. Each boy turned toward the glow, as though instinct drove them, as though the setting sun unlocked something ancient inside. Visitors stepped back, clutching notebooks uselessly, documenting horrors words couldn't capture. The boys shifted, their bones popping, limbs elongating. What began as ordinary silhouettes stretched grotesquely against cage bars. The eldest dropped his book, hands warping into claws, jaw straining until teeth gleamed jagged. He let out a guttural cry that vibrated through iron, echoing down the spine of every listener. The twins' faces contorted simultaneously, mouths splitting wider than natural, voices harmonizing into a low, hungry howl. Their movements became perfectly mirrored, no longer children, but one entity pacing in two bodies. The youngest stood, blanket falling aside, revealing limbs too long, fingers spider-like. Drool pooled at his feet as his mouth spread open unnaturally, revealing teeth stacked in horrifying rows. The caretaker locked the barn door, chest heaving. "Now you see," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Now you understand why the cages must stay closed. This is what they become when night falls." Outside, darkness deepened. crickets silenced, and the wind carried unnatural howls. The barn trembled under pounding fists and claws, yet the chains held for now. But no man could believe they'd hold forever. The sight branded itself into memory. Boys twisted beyond recognition, still bearing fragments of humanity in their eyes. Trapped between childhood and monstrosity, they awaited dawn like condemned men await the noose. Inside those cages, a war raged nightly, not only of hunger but of identity. By sunrise, they would smile again, wiping blood from lips, asking for books, pretending daylight restored innocence. But in truth, the cages didn't hold children anymore. They held harbingers of something greater, something inevitable. Their existence was no accident. It was a glimpse of tomorrow clawing its way into the present. The barn became more than containment. It was prophecy, steel bars groaning beneath the weight of evolution. And each night, as locks strained, the question lingered. How long before the cages failed? The farmhouse kitchen was orderly, every surface scrubbed clean, yet bolts sealed every window tight. On the table lay a thick folder filled with papers, photographs, and journals once belonging to Robert Crowley. Robert had been respected once, known for steady hands and calm wisdom with animals. Neighbors trusted him, farmers relied on him, but his private writings revealed torment far darker than any livestock ailment. He had charted the first signs meticulously, unexplained cravings for raw meat, teeth loosening, then replaced by rows far sharper than before, night terrors escalating until sunrise offered brief reprieve from the growing madness. Robert's notes grew frantic as months passed, detailing bone elongation, limbs stretching unnaturally, muscles twisting beyond human proportion. He knew something ancient stirred within him, something carried by soil, water, and breath. He wrote of Camp Garrison, an old military testing ground nearby. Officials claimed harmless experiments, but Robert suspected they had awakened spores lying dormant for centuries, spores that rewrote bodies from within. The journals contained sketches, too. Cattle with serpentine spines, hogs sprouting additional jaws, chickens whose eyes migrated across their skulls. He had burned entire herds, yet the sickness persisted, spreading into his own bloodline. In one entry, Robert described building his first cage, not for livestock, but for himself. He begged his wife to lock him inside at dusk, to release him only at dawn. He remained a man during daylight, affectionate and articulate, but once the sun fell, he transformed into something ravenous. His screams echoed through the barn while his wife wept outside locked doors. The pages revealed a pact between husband and wife. He instructed her to end his life once he no longer returned to himself at sunrise. Better death than unleashing what he was becoming. Neighbors who wondered why Robert disappeared never knew that November morning when his wife found him unchanged, even under full daylight. His eyes reflected only hunger, his humanity consumed completely. She fulfilled his request with one shot, burying him beside the livestock he once healed. The journal entry ended abruptly, the ink blurred, as if smudged by her trembling hands. Yet his legacy remained, etched into every rule pinned to the farmhouse wall. Lock all doors before dusk, feed only raw meat, never touch after 6, never release before sunrise under any circumstance. The eldest son had seen everything, watching his father's nightly imprisonment, hearing screams that no child should endure. He carried that memory silently, his eyes aged far beyond his 14 years. The twins knew, too. They remembered their father's shadow pacing within cages, clawing at bars, howling at the moon. Their synchronized voices carried echoes of those sounds whenever dusk approached. The youngest had never met his father, yet inherited the transformation fully. Born already different, his body bent by the curse, his existence proved Robert's blood carried more than memories. It carried inevitability. In his writings, Robert mentioned government men arriving in black cars. He believed they were monitoring him, waiting for containment to fail, prepared to erase his family to preserve wider secrecy. He suspected experiments at Camp Garrison were never meant for containment, but for creating soldiers. The spores made men stronger, faster, more resilient. But once darkness fell, control was lost entirely. Robert tracked other families across the plains, finding identical symptoms. Farmers vanishing, livestock slaughtered, homes burned to ash. Authorities labeled them accidents, yet Robert knew they were failed attempts at controlling infection. The journals included photographs he stole from medical files, bodies twisted, jaws dislocated, spines lengthened grotesquely. Officials marked them as wild animal attacks, but Robert identified the truth. They were men transformed. He grew convinced the spores weren't disease but design. Not human design, but nature's ancient tool, rewriting species when balance tipped too far. Humanity had poisoned soil and water, awakening something waiting patiently. Robert's handwriting grew increasingly illegible, lines trembling as though written under duress. He described cravings he could barely resist, nights where he awoke with blood beneath his nails, unable to remember slaughter. In one confession, he admitted killing a deer with his bare hands, ripping its throat with teeth he no longer recognized. By morning, he vomited, yet felt hunger unquenched, appetite only growing. Despite terror, he loved his sons fiercely. He documented each of their early symptoms, marking dates when sunlight began to sting, when cravings for rare meat replaced ordinary meals, when strength doubled overnight. He begged that they be caged before sunset each day, insisting their innocence remained in daylight. He refused to see them executed, choosing containment over extermination, even if it meant endless suffering. The farmhouse walls bore these rules in his handwriting, lines underlined twice, smudged by years of anxious fingers tracing them again. They were both instruction and confession, reminders of his doomed choices. In secret, he wrote letters to his sons, never delivered, tucked between pages of medical notes. He urged them to hold on to memory, to remember humanity, even as their bodies betrayed them. The eldest once found one such letter. He read it silently, tears staining the paper. He never shared the words, but his gaze grew more haunted afterward, burden heavier than any boy should bear. The twins sometimes hummed fragments of their father's howls, unintentionally echoing his nightly cries. They could not recall him clearly, yet their bodies carried his rhythm, their transformations following his exact pattern. The youngest bore his father's shadow most fiercely. Born changed, he embodied culmination of the curse. His very existence was Robert's final legacy, proof the spores could embed themselves into unborn blood. Around the farm, reminders of Robert lingered, rusting traps he had set, scorched earth where he burned infected livestock, claw marks along beams where he had tested his strength before nightfall overtook reason. His absence haunted every corner. The kitchen still held his coffee mug, chipped at the rim. The barn smelled faintly of his sweat mixed with iron. His ghost lived in instructions and scars. Yet whispers in town told different tales. Some men believed Robert fled, abandoning family. Others claimed he lost his mind and wandered into wilderness. None imagined he died caged, transformed beyond recognition. His wife bore the truth silently, presenting herself as caretaker. She never revealed that Robert's infection spread into her own blood, scars along her arms, proof she too battled nightly hunger. She prepared her sons with Robert's rules, teaching them discipline born from despair. Each lock fastened was both prison and salvation, each ration of raw meat an attempt to stave uncontrollable violence. Robert's journals warned of escalation. He predicted transformations would grow permanent, daylight reprieve shortening until it vanished entirely. He foresaw a time when cages would no longer hold, when fire would be last resort. The eldest clung to hope that memory could preserve humanity. The twins accepted inevitability, resigned to hunger's rhythm. The youngest knew nothing else, his identity forged entirely by monstrous inheritance. Robert's shadow lingered most in the barn. Each creak of chains, each growl at sunset mirrored his own descent years earlier. His sons carried him in bone and blood, haunted by echoes. Visitors who read his journals trembled at their honesty. They weren't ramblings of madness, but calculated documentation. Every symptom matched precisely what unfolded before their eyes as the boys shifted nightly. The final entry chilled most of all. "When dawn no longer returns me, burn me." His wife had obeyed, but she could never burn her sons. Instead, she bound them with iron. And so the farm became mausoleum, each cage both prison and gravestone, housing sons who inherited Robert's fate. His shadow hung over every scream, every claw mark, every whispered plea for release. The story of Robert Crowley was not one of madness alone, but of devotion twisted by forces older than memory. He sought to save his sons by caging them, knowing freedom meant death, but shadows cannot be caged forever. Robert's transformation ended with a bullet, yet his sons carried his unfinished story. And as the sun set each evening, his shadow stretched long across the farm. The day ended slowly across the Nebraska plains, light stretching thin like fading breath. Men working the fields packed their tools, unaware that only miles away a barn prepared to swallow the sun's final warmth. Inside, the caretaker checked locks one last time. His hands shook, sweat dripping onto steel as he whispered apologies to each boy. The ritual never grew easier, though repetition kept him alive. The eldest boy pressed his forehead against iron, calm though his breathing quickened. He asked softly whether tonight might be different, whether dawn would arrive without screams, though both knew the answer remained unchanged. The twins sat shoulder to shoulder, rocking slightly. Their lips moved in synchronized silence until words emerged. "Night is coming." Their voices layered strangely, harmonizing with tones that reverberated through the entire barn. The youngest crouched low, fingers curled into straw, whispering laughter that grated like glass. His teeth chattered as though in anticipation, his eyes reflecting torchlight, hunger spilling from him long before shadows deepened. The caretaker stepped back, lantern trembling in his grip. He watched each cage carefully, knowing patterns now, how bones shifted, how growls deepened, how chains strained. Still, every night felt like facing execution anew. Outside, the sun dipped lower, transforming the horizon into blood-soaked fire. Crows circled overhead, restless, their cries loud against otherwise still air, as though nature itself braced for what clawed awake within the barn. The eldest's fingers cracked audibly, bones stretching beneath skin, his jaw convulsed, teeth elongating into serrated points. His groan deepened, vibrating against steel until locks rattled as though they too feared containment, failing suddenly. The twins mirrored each other perfectly, spines bending in unison, muscles twisting until their silhouettes no longer resembled children. Their breathing synchronized, animalistic, hissing in rhythm like serpents trapped inside mirrored cages. The youngest jerked violently, body contorting unnaturally. His laughter broke into screeches, echoing shrill against rafters. He clawed at the ground, splinters embedding beneath elongated nails, his movements frantic, feral, unrestrained by reason. The caretaker stumbled backward, clutching his rifle though he knew it useless. He had fired before, bullets slowing them briefly but never killing. Only fire promised permanence, yet fire meant burning everything. Lantern light flickered as shadows surged larger, monstrous silhouettes stretching across walls. The barn itself seemed alive, trembling with their collective transformation, groaning under weight of forces far older than timber beams could bear. The eldest lunged at bars suddenly, rattling steel with unnatural strength. His voice, distorted, still carried fragments of words. Hungry. Let me out. Each syllable fractured into growls, yet meaning pierced clear, undeniable. The twins slammed against their cages simultaneously, synchronized force shaking chains. Their mouths stretched impossibly wide, rows of teeth gleaming, voices chanting guttural tones. Together, they created sound resembling an ancient hymn of hunger. The youngest gnawed at bars, grinding teeth until sparks flew against iron. Blood dripped from his lips, yet pain fueled him, not hindered. His laughter crescendoed, manic, echoing into prairie darkness outside. Wind howled across fields, rattling shingles loose, carrying cries outward. Farmers miles away stirred uneasily. Dogs barked without cause. Horses reared within stables, each animal sensing predators awakening beyond human understanding. The caretaker bolted the main door, heart hammering. Sweat drenched his shirt. He whispered Robert's rules under breath, repeating them like prayer, convincing himself iron and discipline would hold long enough until dawn. But dawn felt impossibly far. Each second dragged heavy, filled with growls, claws scraping steel, voices twisting human syllables into monstrous tones. The barn pulsed with unholy rhythm, every heartbeat matched by theirs. The eldest suddenly stilled, eyes glowing faintly, pupils slit like predators. He whispered something chilling. "You cannot hold us forever." His tone was not plea but prophecy, certainty dripping from each syllable. The twins joined, repeating his words in harmony. "Forever ends soon." Their chant vibrated through beams, dust raining from rafters. The caretaker covered his ears, but vibrations lodged deep inside marrow, unshakable. The youngest shrieked until chains snapped partially, metal bending under relentless assault. He writhed, half free yet still bound. The caretaker rushed forward, reinforcing locks with trembling hands, narrowly containing eruption before disaster unfolded. His chest heaved violently, lungs burning with fear. He glimpsed youngest's eyes staring directly, unblinking, filled with malicious knowing. The boy grinned, teeth coated crimson, whispering clearly, "Tomorrow, your locks will not matter." The caretaker staggered backward, slamming butt of rifle against floor, forcing courage into limbs. He shouted at them, reminding of daylight innocence, begging humanity buried deep within monstrous shells to remember family ties. For brief moments, silence fell. The eldest blinked, voice cracking between growl and word. "Father?" His question cut raw, reminder of man who had caged himself first, leaving legacy none could escape. The twins whimpered, rocking again, voices fractured. "Father, father." Their tone shifted from menace to mourning, echoes of children who still lingered beneath twisted frames, trapped in memories fading with every nightfall. The youngest spat blood, growl resonant, rejecting memory. His hunger eclipsed sentiment, his body already too far gone. He lunged once more, rattling bars until beams splintered, dust cascading down like rain. The caretaker collapsed against wall, mind spiraling. He realized Robert's prediction loomed nearer. Dawn would fail someday, transformations becoming permanent. That night, he feared prophecy might unfold sooner than anyone prepared to accept. The eldest resumed clawing bars, relentless, his humanity slipping further with every strike. His voice split between screams and sobs, torn between hunger and memory, between beast and boy, between survival and destruction. The twins continued chanting, rhythm building, their voices growing louder than storm outside. Their chant no longer carried recognizable words, only vibrations older than language, calling to something vast, unseen, beyond sky. The youngest crouched low again, panting, preparing for final burst. His gaze locked on caretaker, lips curling into smile not belonging to child. Hunger radiated from him like heat rising from asphalt. The caretaker clutched rifle tighter, whispering Robert's name, begging guidance. He knew bullets could not save him, but still he loaded chamber, preparing to choose mercy over catastrophe should locks finally fail. Minutes dragged into hours, growls never ceasing. Barn vibrated with energy unnatural, pulsing through floorboards into earth. Prairie outside grew silent, nature itself recoiling from presence of children no longer human. Suddenly, eldest collapsed against bars, panting heavily, transformation plateauing. His eyes flickered between predator and boy, sweat mixing with blood. He whispered faintly, almost ashamed, "Please, keep us in." Humanity still lingered. Caretaker nodded, tears burning eyes. His resolve hardened again. He realized his duty remained. Not savior, not father, but jailer. Until dawn returned, his role was to chain shadows born from Robert's blood. Through night, he prayed silently, ignoring screams, ignoring hunger pressing against iron. He begged sky for sunrise, for reprieve, for hours to shorten. Each howl reminded him dawn was never guaranteed. When first pale light pierced horizon, barn quieted suddenly. Growls subsided, claws retracted, twisted forms eased. Boys slumped against bars, exhaustion overtaking monstrous energy. The nightmare paused, though never ended. Caretaker unlocked door cautiously, stepping inside cautiously. He saw children again, tired, blood-stained, hollow-eyed, but children nonetheless. They looked at him pleadingly, memories of monstrosity buried beneath fragile dawn. He whispered to them gently, promising they were safe, though he knew safety was illusion. Night would come again, and each night, shadows stretched longer, cages groaned weaker, prophecy edged closer. Nightfall had not claimed them fully yet, but it marked territory deeper each evening. What once seemed curse now looked like evolution. Robert's shadow thickened, preparing to consume every dawn left. The morning was still when the engines came. Dust lifted from the old county road as a convoy of black cars rolled forward, windows darkened, metal gleaming, their arrival shattering fragile silence. Men stepped out in silence, each dressed in gray suits, faces unreadable, movements deliberate. They carried briefcases heavier than leather, filled not with contracts, but documents thicker with secrets and lies. The caretaker watched from the porch, rifle hidden behind his chair. He knew this day would arrive. Robert had written about them, warned of their patience, men who hunted shadows without compassion. The eldest boy peered from behind curtains, his eyes narrowing. He recognized danger instinctively, not from weapons, but from calm precision. These were men who came to erase, not to protect. The twins pressed close together, whispering words that hummed with strange resonance. Their voices layered against each other, muttering warnings neither fully understood, yet their gaze fixed on the black cars outside. The youngest crouched by the barn door, claws twitching unconsciously. He smelled something different in the air, chemical, sterile, unnatural. He hissed softly, sensing poison carried by men who masked it with suits. The leader approached slowly, polished shoes crunching gravel. His smile was thin, rehearsed, his words colder than December. He introduced himself only as Carter, offering a handshake that the caretaker refused. Carter's men spread out, inspecting barns and fields with unsettling precision. They measured soil, examined water troughs, collected samples without permission, documenting every sign that infection had rooted deeply into this land. The caretaker demanded answers, voice shaking. Carter responded calmly, describing spores buried during military experiments decades earlier. He admitted the Crowley farm was not alone. Containment efforts had failed across hidden corners. He spoke clinically, as though reciting data. Infected families erased from records, entire towns abandoned, livestock slaughtered without explanation. His words lacked emotion, his eyes never blinking, his purpose terrifyingly clear. The caretaker asked why they came now. Carter explained threshold had been reached, symptoms advancing, transformations accelerating. He claimed responsibility was national security, but his expression revealed truth. This was elimination, not protection. The eldest stepped outside suddenly, standing tall though his body trembled. He asked Carter whether humanity had any place for them, whether cages could save lives. Carter answered bluntly, "You are classified as threats." The twins echoed in unison. Threats, threats. Their chant unsettled even the suited men, who shifted uncomfortably. Their mirrored movements seemed less human than Carter's cold efficiency, proof of infection evolving beyond control. The youngest bared his teeth, growling low, restrained only by chains still fastened. Carter's men reached for weapons concealed beneath coats, but Carter raised a hand calmly, signaling restraint, his gaze locked on child. Carter requested entry into the barn. The caretaker refused, but men moved anyway, unlocking heavy doors with cutting tools. Inside, cages stood like monuments, proof undeniable that Robert's warnings had always been real. The eldest shouted for them to leave, his voice echoing against steel. Carter only smiled faintly, remarking that records would close today. The boys would not survive another night, not under government watch. The caretaker raised rifle, finger trembling on trigger. He demanded they step away. Carter's men reached for sidearms instantly, tension snapping taut. Yet Carter gestured for calm, his tone soothing though filled with menace. He explained that fire awaited barns like this one. Flames purified faster than bullets. Entire counties burned once infection spread unchecked. His words painted picture of horror far larger than Crowley Farm. The caretaker faltered, sweat dripping, rifle wavering. He knew Carter's words weren't threat but truth. Robert had warned of black cars, warned they never arrived until fire already waited nearby. The eldest stepped forward again, jaw clenched, determination hardening his face. He declared they would not be erased quietly. His voice cracked between humanity and beast, but courage carried through each syllable. The twins gripped bars tightly, chanting louder now. Their voices layered like storm winds, filling barn with vibrations that rattled loose nails. Carter's men covered ears, grimacing at sound they could not classify. The youngest lunged at bars, screeching, saliva spraying, strength cracking metal. Carter's expression shifted slightly, curiosity piercing mask of calm. For first time, he looked unnerved, realizing infection produced something beyond predictions. The caretaker shouted for boys to stop. His words drowned beneath chorus of growls and chants. Chains groaned under strain. The barn seemed alive, pulsing with hunger and fury, walls trembling like frightened flesh. Carter turned sharply, ordering his men to prepare containment. They retrieved canisters marked with military symbols, liquid sloshing ominously. Fire waited within those metal shells, eager to erase evidence permanently. The caretaker begged them to reconsider, pleading that daylight still preserved humanity in his sons. Carter ignored him, repeating mantra of national security, insisting survival of many required sacrifice of few. The eldest locked eyes with caretaker, voice breaking. "Don't let them burn us." His words pierced deeper than chains, forcing man to face choice between father's rules and Black Car's merciless authority. The twins continued chanting, their voices rising into harmony that felt ancient, older than soil itself. Even Carter faltered, his jaw tightening, sweat forming as he sensed something greater moving within them. The youngest snapped chains free suddenly, lunging forward until bars bent outward. Carter's men raised weapons instantly, shouts echoing, but caretaker fired rifle into ceiling, demanding ceasefire before blood-filled barn completely. Silence returned briefly, heavy and suffocating. Dust floated through beams of sunlight, breaking between cracks. Carter stared coldly, calculating, realizing Crowley Farm was not mere containment, but crucible, where evolution outpaced control. He whispered to himself, not expecting answer. "It's accelerating." His words chilled caretaker, who recognized truth. Robert's predictions unfolded. The black cars had not come to contain, but to witness end begin. Outside, engines roared as more vehicles arrived, soldiers stepping out with flamethrowers slung across shoulders. Their expressions were hard, training clear. They did not see children. They saw threats demanding immediate destruction. The caretaker stood trembling, torn between surrender and defiance. His rifle felt useless against such force, yet love outweighed fear. He would not let Robert's sons be reduced to ashes without fight. The eldest spoke again, calm yet desperate. "We are not gone yet." His words resonated through barn, echoed by twins' chant, reinforced by youngest's growl. Together, they defied verdict pronounced by men outside. Carter's eyes narrowed. He ordered soldiers to prepare ignition, yet hesitation lingered. He knew destroying them erased answers forever. He wanted research, not just ash. Containment could still serve ambition larger than orders. The caretaker saw opening, begging Carter to delay, to study rather than burn. Carter paused, calculating benefits. His silence stretched long. Soldiers shifted nervously, sensing tension snapping like wire under weight. The eldest reached fingers through bars, staring at Carter. "You fear us," he said quietly. Carter said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Fear hung heavier than smoke already waiting to ignite. The youngest bared teeth again, blood dripping. His grin widened into something unholy. "You cannot stop what has started." His voice, layered, echoed deeper than child's throat should allow, chilling men to bone. The caretaker stepped forward, rifle raised not at soldiers, but at Carter. He demanded choice, leave sons alive or burn with them. His voice no longer shook. Desperation transformed into unyielding resolve. Carter finally spoke, voice flat. "We will wait one night more." His words offered reprieve but not mercy. Black cars remained, soldiers stayed. Flames hovered close, patient as dawn awaited inevitable nightfall. The caretaker lowered rifle slowly, heart pounding. He had bought only hours, not safety. The black cars stayed like vultures circling, waiting to strike when weakness revealed itself, when nightfall turned boys completely. Inside barn, boys slumped back into cages, exhausted yet defiant. Their eyes glowed faintly even in daylight. Shadows lengthened outside, black cars idling, soldiers restless. The battle for Crowley Farm had only begun. Dawn broke gray across the plains, light pale and hesitant, as though even the sun feared what lingered inside the barn. The black cars remained parked outside, engines idling softly, waiting. Inside, the caretaker watched his sons stir, exhaustion etched into their faces. They looked human again, tired boys behind iron, though their eyes betrayed hunger that daylight could no longer fully silence. Carter entered quietly, his men behind him. He observed with clinical detachment, noting details into a small leather notebook. He didn't see children. He saw specimens, data points confirming predictions no one wanted spoken aloud. The eldest sat upright, meeting Carter's stare without fear. His voice was steady, though cracked from night's ordeal. "We are still here. We are still men." His words challenged judgment heavier than chains. The twins shifted in their cage, whispering in harmony. Still men, still hunger. Their chant filled the barn, unsettling soldiers unused to voices that sounded both human and inhuman in equal measure. The youngest crouched silent, watching Carter with narrowed eyes. He grinned slowly, teeth gleaming, as though recognizing predator across from predator. His silence spoke more than growls, certainty that change could no longer be undone. Carter closed notebook and announced decision. At dusk, they would be taken. Whether to lab or fire, he didn't clarify. His men nodded silently, preparing equipment. The caretaker clenched fists in futile rage. He begged Carter to reconsider, voice raw. He spoke of Robert's warnings, of humanity that still lingered in daylight. Carter dismissed him coldly, repeating mantra. Survival of many outweighs fate of few. The eldest slammed fists against bars, defiant. You fear us because you see tomorrow. His words carried eerie weight, echoed instantly by twins. Even the youngest hissed agreement, grin widening like crack in stone. Carter faltered momentarily, eyes narrowing. He snapped order to soldiers. Reinforce locks, prepare transport. Men moved quickly, layering chains, securing cages with fresh steel. The caretaker felt hope draining like blood from open wound. Hours passed, sun climbing reluctantly. Soldiers patrolled fields, weapons slung ready. Neighbors avoided road entirely, sensing danger radiating outward. The farm became fortress under siege, tension pressing down heavier than summer heat. Inside barn, boys whispered among themselves, plotting. Their voices low, rhythm unnatural, language bending beyond English. Even caretaker couldn't understand words, though meaning chilled him. Plans whispered by evolution itself, ancient and inevitable. The eldest turned to him finally. When night comes, we will no longer wait. You must choose. His eyes glowed faintly, though sun still shone, proof that transformation now ignored natural law. Caretaker collapsed into chair, face buried in hands. He remembered Robert's journals, warnings of permanent change, predictions written decades ago. The question loomed heavy, protect sons or destroy them before world followed. Carter reappeared at noon, offering deal. Deliver boys quietly to government custody, avoid fire. He promised research, progress, perhaps cure. His smile betrayed truth. He wanted weapon, not salvation. The caretaker refused. The youngest laughed suddenly, startling soldiers. His voice layered, resonant, carrying promise older than man. No cage will hold us. Not tonight, not ever again. His words struck like prophecy, undeniable and final. As sun lowered, unease spread among soldiers. They whispered nervously, recalling screams from previous night. None wanted to witness transformation again, yet duty bound them. Carter remained cold, though sweat glistened at his temples. The eldest began humming low, chest vibrating with unnatural resonance. Twins joined instantly, harmonizing in tones that rattled rafters. Youngest added shrieks layered high. Together they created chorus both terrifying and magnetic. Caretaker begged them to stop, voice cracking, but chant grew louder, spilling from barn into open air. Soldiers clutched ears, grimacing. Birds took flight in panic. Cattle miles away broke fences, fleeing unseen terror. Carter barked orders, shouting for containment. Men readied flamethrowers, their nozzles pointed at barn. Yet hesitation lingered. None wished to ignite prematurely, not with caretaker standing before doors, rifle raised in trembling defiance. The sky darkened swiftly, sun drowning behind horizon like extinguished ember. Growls erupted from cages instantly, metal clanging violently. Soldiers shouted in panic. The caretaker braced himself, tears streaming, whispering final prayer. Chains snapped like twigs. The eldest burst forward, body warped beyond human, yet eyes still carrying fragments of boyhood. He roared, charging bars until they exploded outward, shards flying like shrapnel. The twins surged together, moving as one, their limbs twisting in mirrored synchrony. They leapt free, tearing through steel as though it were straw, voices harmonizing into guttural cry older than language. The youngest crawled out laughing, movement spider-like, body jerking unnaturally fast. Soldiers opened fire, bullets ripping straw and wood, but he darted between them, claws slashing, screams following each strike of sharpened bone. The eldest tore weapons from hands, tossing soldiers aside with monstrous strength. The twins leapt onto trucks, overturning engines, metal shrieking. The youngest ripped through hoses, flames spilling uncontrolled across field. Carter shouted for retreat, voice cracking for first time. His calm fractured as he realized control shattered utterly. Black cars revved desperately, soldiers scrambling, chaos consuming carefully orchestrated operation. The caretaker staggered forward, screaming for sons to stop. For a moment, eldest paused, looking back with hollow eyes, torn between hunger and recognition. He whispered faintly, "Father." Then roar overtook words again. Flames spread rapidly, devouring barn, igniting fields. Soldiers fled, abandoning vehicles, abandoning mission. Carter stumbled into car, barking orders through radio, demanding reinforcements. Yet his eyes betrayed terror he never admitted aloud. The caretaker collapsed on ground, watching inferno consume history. His sons moved within fire unscathed, silhouettes monstrous yet majestic, bodies no longer restrained by cages. They had become something fire could not erase. Neighbors miles away saw glow against sky, mistaking it for controlled burn. Only Carter's men knew truth, that evolution walked free now, no longer contained, no longer confined to Crowley Farm. The eldest stood tall among flames, chest rising. He raised head to sky, howling. Twins echoed instantly, youngest shrieking harmony. Their chorus carried across plains, announcing birth of future darker than dawn. Carter's car sped away, dust trailing. He scribbled frantic notes, whispering single word repeatedly. Unstoppable. He knew project no longer belonged to government. It belonged to whatever had awakened inside Robert's sons. The caretaker crawled toward barn, tears blinding. He begged for them to remember humanity, to remember daylight innocence. Yet their eyes glowed crimson, their forms shifting beyond recall. Evolution had claimed them fully. Still, eldest hesitated once more, gaze softening briefly. He whispered faintly through monstrous maw, "Remember us." Then he turned away, vanishing into night with brothers, leaving caretaker alone among ashes. The farm smoldered through dawn, carcasses of cars and weapons scattered. Survivors whispered rumors, but officials erased records swiftly. To public, nothing happened. To plains, however, everything changed. For in distant woods, 3 figures moved together, shadows stretching unnaturally. They hunted silently, no longer children, no longer men, but something forged between. Their hunger bound them, their destiny undeniable. Carter reported failure, his words sterile. Yet deep inside, he feared truth. Extinction had already begun, disguised as evolution. Robert's prophecy was not warning, but roadmap. Humanity faced new species rising. The caretaker remained on ruins, silent sentinel over graveyard of memories. He knew fire hadn't destroyed curse. It had only scattered seeds wider. Nightfall would come again, and with it, transformation. In every howl carried across prairie, men shivered unknowingly. The world had shifted forever. It wasn't disease anymore. It was inheritance, legacy written in bone, extinction or evolution. Choices blurred until none remained. The Crowley sons disappeared into darkness, their silhouettes merging with horizon. Their laughter and howls echoed into night, heralding future. Humanity listened unknowingly, standing at edge of precipice, unable to turn back. And so the question remained, heavier than ash across fields. Would mankind fight to preserve itself, or surrender to hunger carried by Robert's bloodline? Dawn brought no answer, only silence, waiting for night again.